n'abasajja wamu.
In Loro police station arrested for overloading a vehicle as we were going.
Tajja kuyingiramu.
All persons here assembled are commanded in the name of the President of Uganda to disperse peacefully to their homes or lawful businesses. Persons who disobey this order shall be dispersed by force. That may include use of rifle fire directed at any such person here assembled.
How do you push a presidential candidate like that? How? We are not slaves. We are not
Ugandans all around America came to DC today to talk about these atrocities and request and make a demand and make a plea and beseech the State Department to stop funding the Museveni government, to stop funding the Ugandan government. People were shot by American taxpayer bullets bought by American taxpayer money. So we are here and we request you to join us. Our movement is called the People Power Movement. The leader is Honorable Kyagulanyi Ssentamu. He's an aspiring president for the 2021 election in Uganda.
People power, our power.
People power.
We want to send this message to the dictator Yoweri Museveni, who has been in power for 35 years. Today, this very day, as we speak right now, Museveni today has killed 11 people who are in Mukono district following His Excellency Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu at his campaign meetings. Museveni last week killed over 60 Ugandans who were protesting on the streets because of arrest of the presidential candidate, His Excellency Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu. So the blood is continuing to flow on the streets of Uganda.
We are fighting for freedom. Kampala, DC, Boston, America. Fighting for Museveni must go.
Yes, Ugandans know how to unite. Ugandans united in the past when they came together and threw out the British Empire in 1962. They did not do it as Baganda, Basoga, Langi, Acholi, Madi. No, they did it as one collective people, as Ugandans. In unity, there is strength. So if Ugandans could throw out the British Empire, it's obvious that they can get rid of dictator General Yoweri Museveni, who's ruined the country for the last 34 years. So Ugandans, come together, throw General Museveni out by the ballot box, or if necessary, the Constitution does allow other measures. In fact, the Constitution obligates Ugandans to get rid of tyranny. The 1950s and the 1960s were very hopeful and promising times in Africa, in Uganda. In the 50s, 1957, Nkrumah had led Ghana to independence. So this inspired African nationalists throughout the continent, and of course in Uganda as well. We had people like Boniface Byanyima, later on became a leading member of parliament. He was always very vocal against any anti-democratic tendency, And he lived a very long life, actually. He lived until 2017, when he was 96 years old. My own father, Otema Ali Madi, was involved in the resistance against colonialism. He used to smuggle Ugandans, young Ugandans, who he got scholarships for and sent them to study in the Eastern Bloc countries, because those were the countries willing to give scholarships to African students. And the British didn't like this. He was arrested many times, but that was his contribution to the struggle. And later on, after independence, he was ambassador to the United Nations, to the United States, and then later on, he was foreign minister and prime minister, and he passed away in 2001 in Uganda. And then as Uganda prepared for independence, Benedicto Kiwanuka became the first prime minister during that period before independence, from March 1st to October 9, 1962. And then when Uganda became independent, Milton Obote became the first prime minister after independence. And Edward Mutesa, Sir Edward Mutesa II, became the head of state and president. And of course, Mutesa was also the Kabaka of Baganda, the hereditary king of Baganda Kingdom, which of course is a part of the nation of Uganda. Now, that was a marriage of political convenience between Obote and Mutesa. And at some point they had a falling out in 1966, and that is called the Baganda crisis, when Prime Minister Obote then used Idi Amin, Colonel Idi Amin, one of the commanders in the army, to attack the palace of Mutesa. And Mutesa fled to exile, and where he died in 1969. And after that, Obote resorted to authoritarian rule in Uganda. He imprisoned some of his political opponents, whom he accused of plotting to overthrow him. One of the people he locked up was Kiwanuka, who had been the first prime minister before independence. And that was the setting when in 1971 the chickens came home to roost. The same Idi Amin, who had helped Obote depose Mutesa, then decides to overthrow Obote. There was some investigation going on, and Amin was implicated in some illegal activities, and basically was just saving his neck. So he overthrows Obote. Now it's Obote's turn to go into exile. And from authoritarian rule, Uganda now descends into bloody, tyrannical rule under Idi Amin. Amin was initially welcomed, of course, because by that time, particularly in Uganda, Obote had become quite unpopular. So Amin was celebrated, and in fact he made Kiwanuka the Chief Justice of Uganda. But then once Amin unleashed his tyranny, and at some point became essentially paranoid in terms of people that he thought were plotting against him and trying to undermine him, So he unleashed the killing spree, and Kiwanuka happened to be one of his victims. This is the Chief Justice of the court, dragged out from the bench in broad daylight, packed into the back of a vehicle in the trunk, and reportedly personally killed by Idi Amin himself. And I mean, spare no one. Even priests were not immune. Janani Luwum, who was the Archbishop of Uganda, one of the greatest leaders of the church on the African continent. He was also Archbishop of Rwanda, Burundi, and Boga, which is a part of the Congo. When at some point he told Idi Amin, enough is enough. You spilled this too much blood of Ugandans. So what does Amin do? In 1977, he personally kills this great archbishop in 1977. And then he stages a ridiculous so-called car crash where the bodies were actually put back in a vehicle and the vehicle was struck to try to reenact an accident scene. It was just so preposterous. So 1971, after 1971, that was essentially the end of all those dreams that the people that fought to liberate Uganda, to free Uganda, all those dreams of creating a united, prosperous African nation run by Africans after getting rid of colonial rule. That all seemed to die at that time.
Until 2 years back, I supported the NRM. I joined politics as a youth leader, and then we were trained how to hate people that embraced multipartyism, and we are told that multipartyism was bad, multi-party democracy was bad, because it caused divisions amongst the people. In 2000, we advocated for the movement system, causing a constitutional amendment that, because in the constitution had provided that in 2000 we shall opt a system that Ugandans desired. And I was part of the team that desired to have the movement system. Barely 5 years, we are brought back to the front stage to now campaign for multi-party democracy. And the ground was that the other people were simply too difficult to work with. And the campaign slogan of the president was like, Tuba Jeko. So we are getting rid of some people. The basis on which we formed multi-party democracy was initially, they say in law, ab initio wrong. So we advocated for multi-party democracy, but alongside that, we also advocated for amendment of the constitution to do away with term limits. That the president had done a lot of good things, and therefore the president was supposed to stay, so that we reward him at least by an extra term. We campaigned for the president simply to say thank you so much for fighting a dictatorship in the 1980s and ushering in a democratic governance. That was 2006. I campaigned for the president. And 2011, I was in the National Task Force, and I happily, proudly moved around, thinking we are bringing a president that would help us to preside over a system that will bring a new president, Ugandans seeing a peaceful transfer of change, of power from one person to the other. Unfortunately, that did not come to pass. The president returned in 2016. We were like, it's okay, it's only one term, because we had another amendment in the constitution that would see off the president in 2021. It was very shameful to see my teammates come back again to Ugandans to ask them to amend the constitution, to do away with an article, just because they wanted to provide extension for this president, who had earlier said a person is not good to preside over a country after 75 years, because by that time his energy and vigor and reasoning capacity would have gone low. The president was back again because he thought we don't have another person that can steer this nation. And I keep wondering, is the Almighty God not gracious enough to give Uganda another person in 35 years that can be able to govern this country? Is the good Lord so mean that in the whole of Uganda, among us 40 million people, no one else is good enough to preside over this country, so that we can call back a tired person who said by 25 years he would be tired to be able to govern this country? So as a daughter of a freedom fighter, I said, I think this was a little bit difficult to accept. But while I was still contemplating about that, I watched a person being killed in cold blood, Asman Waliendo, just standing next to where I was, simply because he was supporting a person that was not acceptable to this governance. I knew that was Asman's day. The next day could be my day. It might be your day. We cannot simply watch on. Our fathers fought a dictatorship of 1980s. Their children must fight a dictatorship that has come in. Their dreams have been shattered. They thought they would cause peaceful transfer of power from one person to the other. They thought they would put an end to killing of people by state operatives. That has not been realized. It is high time, Ugandans, that we woke up to fight the current regime, because they are not about to go. If we withstand them, they might rule us and their children rule us until Uganda comes to an end. They have nothing to lose. We have everything to lose. They have taken all we had. The least they would take is our freedom. We have lost it. The time is now to cause a peaceful transfer of power. If we don't do it now peacefully, someone else might force it forcefully through violent means, and that will cost us everything, including lives, like it did in 1980s. I stand with Bobi Wine. He's our hope. He's the beacon of light that we have out there, and we are hopeful that if all the youth and women and the elder embrace his candidature, we shall realize the change that we desire to see.
In 2011, I was voted in Makinde Urban Division Council, and I was representing the young people at the zonal level. I also got a chance to represent the young people at the parish level in 2011. This inspired me to run for the youth councillorship position, whereby I was made to represent the young people at the division level. That is Kampala City Council Authority, the institution that governs and passes laws and bylaws that govern the people of Kampala. In 2016, The young people entrusted me with their support, and some of the promises I made to them, the NRM government could not deliver. The NRM government could not give them to us, because when I went to KCCA instead, as a young person who was in NRM by then, I thought I would impact positive change and to see that the young people's visions and promises are fulfilled. But I found an institution that was so disorganized, and this institution was disorganized by the president, who intended to pour water, as he said, to pour water in the institution because it was headed by the Lord Mayor, who was in opposition. So he frustrated the whole program, he frustrated the whole institution, so it could not deliver. This hit me as a young person. If the president of the nation frustrates an institution that is supposed to be delivering, an institution that is supposed to be headed by the politicians and forwarding views and making bylaws, it could not safeguard our future. In 2016, we started a young movement in the NRM, advocating for change in governance, advocating for fighting against corruption, the rule of law, calling out other colleagues to join us to say that even inside the system of the NRM, so many things were wrong. We could change them inside. But we were not given this opportunity as young people. We were denied an opportunity, we were persecuted, we were pushed, and there is no way we could air out our views and say out these words to the government. So we got an opportunity when it came to the age limit. As young people, we are advocating for change of governance, because the NRM structure and the NRM government was not giving us that space to advocate for what is right, to voice out our voices and to say that we safeguard our future. The age limit opened eyes, and that is the time when we decided to follow the Honorable Kyagulanyi Ssentamu as a young person who came in and inspired and joined so many young people all over different camps. And our decision was, let us rise up as a generation to see that we defend our future tomorrow. Honorable Kyagulanyi inspired most of us, and the only option we had was to join him to say that we liberate our country. As young people of this nation, as someone who was in leadership, who saw the high level of corruption, impunity, and disorganization in institutions, I felt like we cannot hold it anymore. We supported in when we stood up against the age limit, but we were more inspired when every young person, even in the NRM, even in all other parties, came to a consensus that this was our time, this was the right time to come and stand up as a generation against impunity, against unfairness, against bribery, against all kinds of intimidation and bad rule and governance. So we stood up to say no more, and we cannot hold this anymore. When Honorable Kyagulanyi Ssentamu launched the People Power movement that inspired us so much, we all joined in to say that we build something new, we bring fresh ideas, we bring the new hope. We show the country that we can rally behind the truth. We can practice true democracy, and we can call upon all generations to join us to say that we proper the system and we have institutions that can perform, that institutions that do not favor a particular person because he's the president, but instead empower institutions that everyone can benefit in. That is why we moved out of the NRM, because these institutions do not only benefit the people in NRM, these institutions benefit every Ugandan. So we joined up to see that we raise our voices, we stand up for the right thing, for democracy, we call for the rule of law, and we are determined in 2021 to say that we bring new governance. We are determined to bring new hope. We are determined to bring up fresh ideas, to pass the rightful policies. Uganda has one of the best policies ever in the world, but we stand up to say those policies need to be implemented, and they will be implemented by us in power. People power, our power, the National Unity Platform.
I have been arrested, brutalized, but prior to that, I was offered 5 billion Uganda shillings as an asking price with 2 vehicles and air-conditioned office. And that if I was to decline, then I would be abducted. Indeed, my life is on the line. The threats are real. My gate was knocked yesterday down by a lorry, unknown, and he ran away. Times are bad. Many of my colleagues have disappeared. Many are arrested and incarcerated with the men in very deplorable conditions and under trumped up charges. These are signs that we must take very, very seriously and remain resilient. Globally, all the human rights standards and commitments have been totally abrogated. There's no respect at all for humanity in this process. So, from bribery to intimidation to disappearances to, the life, it is a life-threatening. Not only for me, at least I can speak, even for my colleagues. People are no longer sleeping in their homes. There's massive military presence and occupancy and meetings to just shoot to kill, to abduct, to make people disappear. These are times that I did not believe I would also live to experience it. I'm therefore calling upon the world to act under the responsibility to protect. The militarization must stop. The impunity must stop. All actors, please, take action in practice. Move away from the rhetoric. It's time for Uganda to see an action, immediate action for this intervention. Otherwise, we are in the worst of times of gross human rights abuses. That must end, that must stop, because we are accountable. We're members of the UN Security Council. We're members of the African Union. So EU, UN Security Council, US, you are still going to wait again like Rwanda? No, I think let us act. This is not only a call. This is not only begging you to act, but it is a demand under your responsibility to protect.
Seseko. He had turned the country's name into Zaire, and of course it's back to its original name, the Congo. Mobutu overthrew Congo's first democratically elected prime minister, Patrice Lumumba, in 1960, and then had him brutally murdered in 1961. Gruesome, really. His body was chopped up into pieces, burned, and then the bones were crushed and dissolved in sulfuric acid. That's how perverted the assassination of Patrice Lumumba was. And he was doing this, obviously, at the behest of foreign interests, Western interests, who just wanted to get rid of Lumumba whom they feared would actually serve the interest of the Congo, not the interest of the West. Mobutu was maintained in power until 1997 with the support of the United States, France, Britain, Belgium, all the Western countries that benefit from Congo's resources, until it was overthrown in 1997. And then we have Hosni Mubarak in Egypt, and he was in power for 30 years until he was overthrown in 2011. Everybody remembers Tahrir Square, the People's Revolution, when the youth finally came out, and they called that the Arab Spring. And Mubarak ultimately was eased out by his own military, because the military saw the writing on the wall that the people had had enough. And then we have Yahya Jammeh in the Gambia, who seized power in 1994, and he was in power until 2017. And this is the individual who claimed that he had found the cure for AIDS. He had been experimenting in his own private lab, I guess. And then we have people like Blaise Compaoré of Burkina Faso, who brutally murdered Thomas Sankara, one of the greatest Pan-African leaders. Sankara is the kind of leader that, the West does not like to see in Africa, because in the brief years that he had as president, just 3-4 years, he really transformed the country, changed the name from Upper Volta to Burkina Faso. Within 3 years, the country was food self-sufficient, because Sankara said, grow what you eat, produce what you use, and use what you produce. Very simple formula. And he just unleashed all the creative energies of the people of Burkina Faso. But countries like France, they didn't like that example. That's the former colonial power. And Sankara was murdered in a very vicious way, very similar to Lumumba. Bullet-riddled body, mutilated, and then buried in a mass grave. All these people that tried to do for Africa, eliminated. And then we have Omar Bashir, closer to Uganda, in Sudan. He was also in power for 30 years until 2019, when the youth, including young women, actually at the forefront of the struggle, also saying enough is enough. And they also sent this dictator packing. His own army also overthrew him when they saw the writing on the wall. All these countries still have tremendous work ahead of them. It's going to be difficult. After so many decades of damage and destruction of all the institutions of state. But you cannot start repairing without first getting rid of tyranny and dictatorship. So they are on their way to creating a better dispensation, a better society in each one of their countries. And of course now, eyes are focused on Uganda with General Yoweri Museveni, who's been in power for 35 years now. And in Uganda, we see these signs that things are ultimately going to change as well.
The current political situation in Uganda is worrying. The government is determined to divide people more than ever before. Police and military and other militias are being used against the people of the nation. People are being beaten. Violence is everywhere. There is no hope. Politics has been highly monetized. For a country so young like Uganda, the people in power are determined to ensure that they continue on controlling us and determining the destination or the destiny of a nation so young like Uganda. But the good news is the people have come together. The oppressed have come together. More than ever before, we have agreed to fight for a common goal together than ever before. Forces of change are coming together. The diaspora is more involved in the struggle than before. The youth are extra involved in the situation than ever before. The religious leaders are coming on board. Cultural leaders are also feeling the pressure. People are now talking truth to power.
People Power is a non-violent anti-dictatorship movement.
It's led by a 38-year-old Member of Parliament, Honorable Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu, well known as Bobi Wine, who is also the leader of the National Unity Platform, which has united Ugandans like never before.
Regardless of ethnicity, religious background, or political affiliation.
People Power supporters want the rule of law. We want an end to mass killings, tortures, assassinations, disappearances or kidnap, and corruption.
We want schools with qualified teachers to teach the children of Uganda. We also want hospitals with medicine for the citizens of Uganda.
We are tired of seeing our children studying beneath trees, yet dictator Museveni and family are flying all over the world in a Gulf Stream worth $50 million that was gotten from stolen foreign aid.
Ghost law. Don't know what rank you have got in police? I don't know. That's not the question. Tomorrow, you may find yourself out of that uniform. You had better work for a situation out there so that when you are outside the uniform, you are safe where you'll be.
Yeah, sure.
Use your head, my friend.
message to the government, expressing what's exactly on the people's mind. Twakoye ebinyigiriza obulamu bwaffe na buli kitumalako eddembe lyaffe. Uganda etambula edda mabega, kituuse n'okutwetamya eggwanga lyaffe. Mulimba mutufuga bubi nnyo nammwe, kale tetuganye mwalwana mu nsiko. Naye omwana gwe wasanga nga tannazaalibwa kati naye yazaala nadda. Kino mukiŋŋambire muzeeyi abamutukako, saba ne bazeeyi banne bamugambeko. Eno ensonga nkyamu nnyo gyalemeddeko kati eggwanga lyonna lyenyamidde. Bagambe yalinga demokulasi mwamubuluka kati yafuuka na hipokulisi. Bagambe yali fundamental change mwagizaala wakati mugifudde no change. Bagamba kyensonga ez'abalwanya kati mwazibukako nammwe mukola biri ebyabali. Bakusaba nti constitution yaabwe togikwatako kuba mwe musigadde essuubi lyabwe. I say we are fighting for freedom. Kampala Mokoto Mbale Jinja. We are fighting for freedom. Kabale Lukunjiri Malala Kasese. We are fighting for freedom. Soroti Chitugum Arua Liragum. We are fighting for freedom. I say Wakiso Masaka Wende Mitana. We are fighting for freedom. Yo! We are living in a time similar to the one of slave trade. This operation is worse than apartheid. The gun is the master, citizen slave. The ball of Africa is bleeding. Question, what was the purpose of the liberation when we can't have a peaceful transition? What is the purpose of the constitution when the government disrespect the constitution? Where is my freedom of expression when you charge me because of my expression? Look what you're doing to this nation. What are you teaching the future generation? See our leaders become misleaders and see our mentors become tormentors. Freedom fighters become dictators. They look on the youth and say we are distractors. We are fighting for freedom. Busi amalaba mutukola chotera. We are fighting for freedom. Nebi bakwachi moroto chadondo. We are fighting for freedom. Badel masinde kabon karamoja. We are fighting for freedom. Oi machiri andongo 40 bundi bujo. We are fighting for freedom. Tusituke baboyi atukimanyi nti okununula eggwanga kitukakatako ffe abaana ba Uganda ffena. Era manya nti bw'otunuulira ebikyamu nosirikireyo olidde mu nsi y'olukwe. Naffe abakulwanirako gwe nosirikira gy'oli obeera otusaddaase. Jjukira nti ne bwe bubeera bumyunga bwakuŋŋanye engo bugitwala ate erinnya. No matter your age, no matter your sex, no matter your religion, no matter your tribe, whether educated or uneducated, it's a revelation for the generation. Whether you a doctor or a farmer, whether you a teacher or policeman, could I be a tax driver or a student, could I be a lawyer, could I be a soldier. We are fighting for freedom. Usituke baboy, temupoa baboy. We are fighting for freedom. Bana Uganda bali kumawanga. We are fighting for freedom. Abana baboda boda na mwemwe bereremu. We are fighting for freedom. Yes man, like Martin Luther said, in the end, we remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends.
A plethora of human rights violations beset Honorable Francis Zake very recently, and that was in addition to the 2 previous torture cases meted on him by the security forces. They picked him from his home just for distributing food to hungry and poor constituents that he leads in the Masaka municipality as a member of parliament, opposition leaning. They beat him, they gouged his eyes almost, they rendered him temporarily blind the officials of Mitiana police station, Mwine Bob Kagara, who is the RPC, before handing him over to another torture chamber called Semi Chieftains of Military Intelligence with headquarters at Mboya, where several Ugandans and foreigners have been tortured under the leadership of Abel Kandiho, who is the director of CMI. But even the successive predecessors have also not been any better, and even the successor to Kandiho will certainly be just as bad, because it's an official government modus operandi to beat up dissidents. Zake was beaten there, he was hanged on the cross like others who get hanged there, detained in a toilet, and beaten and warned against his politics. That was not enough. They transferred him to Special Investigations Division in Chireka, and the beating continued. The enhanced interrogation methods continued there under the leadership of Womanya, who denies responsibility because allegedly he was sick and not there, but his officials, people under his command, under his supervision, did the needful. The likes of Hamdan Twesije, Warugembe, and so on. They beat him again as they hoped to extract from him a statement, a police statement, without his lawyer, in his beaten state, tortured, beaten. A man who should be in hospital was beaten and told that even the Kabaka won't help him. So that's how he was beaten from home for giving out food, rendered temporarily blind, and wheeled out of the detention center in a wheelchair. He has not recovered his proper movement. That's the story.
First and foremost, I was kidnapped because I am a people power supporter and I am a people power activist. And by the time they kidnapped me, I was one of those strong ladies in the people power frontline activists. They tortured me when my hands were tied and my legs were tied. They put me in water. Of course, I was blindfolded. They only removed it when they wanted to talk to me or take me to a different destination or place or area and ask me questions. After that, they could put the blindfold back. They put me on that cross. They took pictures of me, and after that, they removed even that apron they gave me, and I was naked, and they took my pictures. And I am worried. I have this thing in my mind, it is tormenting me, like maybe one day someone is going to come, maybe call me and maybe threaten me, if you don't do this, if you don't do that, we are going to release your naked pictures. So, every time I go on social media, I log into my account, I am scared of seeing these pictures. I was abused. I was abused. Sexually, emotionally. But after a short period of time, this the gentleman who was asking me questions came back. And it seemed he was in a hurry. And he called this one whom he left inside with me in the room. After 3 days, we went to police to make a statement because my family had already reported the case to the police. And I went with 3 individuals plus my lawyer, people power lawyer, Shami Malende. And actually, on our surprise, they wanted to arrest me. I am the victim. I was kidnapped. I am going to the police to make a statement, and they tell me, no, you're supposed to be arrested because you're giving police false information, and that I kidnapped myself. So after our people realizing, because we went in the morning and time had gone, people realizing that maybe there's a problem, and we had communicated these people want to arrest me. So they started causing commotion, and at the end of the day, police feared and maybe were scared of the repercussions. So they released us. Went back home, and up to now, we don't have any report from the police. I last heard one time the police spokesperson, Freddie Nanga, saying that he even misread my name. My name is Nalukeng, and he was like, Naluchenje kidnapped herself. That is the only report we got. It's unfortunately police taking these things for granted, because the people are kidnapped, are tortured, disappear every day, and instead of them taking these things seriously and find our people and find really what happens to people, they just come to defend government, and we wonder whether they are keeping law and order and protecting us as Ugandans. So that is it. No report from anyone or from police. As a torture victim, I have tested unity. My release, like I told you, it was because of unity of different people power supporters. Unity is the only way to go. Let us unite to have a better Uganda. Unity works.
On Easter Monday this year, that is in April, it was on 13th, security operatives raided my home, surrounded it. They had a lot of guns, machine guns, they had sniper guns. They invaded my home, entered forcefully. They arrested me. They took me to CMI, Chieftains of Military Intelligence, in Mbuya military barracks. They tortured me for about 6 days, asking me about my publication. I had published a book called The Greedy Barbarian, a political satire novel. So they arrested me, they interrogated me for the whole 6 days, beating me up, hanged in a toilet. They would beat my joints, they would beat my ankles, they would beat in the head, punch into the face. The whole torture exercise took, it was for about 6 days. So from there, when the pressure became too much, social media pressure from international organizations, civil society organizations, embassies in Uganda, when it was too much, they released me. They took me to court, and I was remanded to prison, where I spent around 15 days. Then I was given court bail. From there, I decided to sit down at home and document whatever I went through in the torture chamber. I wrote another book, that is Banana Republic, where writing is treasonous. I narrated everything that I went through in the torture chamber, in prison, in court, like it happened, like real it happened. So when I released it like this, the following day, again the military besieged my home with guns, with the snipers. Again they arrested me, and they took me again to the torture chamber, where they tortured me for the whole day. Another day in the torture chamber. They detained me for about 4 days, from Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Then on Monday in the evening, they released me on police bond. They charged me with inciting violence and promoting sectarianism. Up to now, I'm still reporting to the police. Even right now, as I'm speaking, I am from there. The rate of human rights abuses in Uganda is actually going overload. The international community must step in. It is an issue not to be ignored. We are back to the days of Idi Amin. You produce an intellectual work, like for example, my book, The Greedy Barbarian, it is a work of literature, African literature, a work of fiction, political satire. But amazingly, when I published it and it was sold, it began selling on the streets, the dictator came and imprisoned me and tortured me to almost losing my life. So when I again narrated my torture ordeal, what I went through in the torture chamber, and I narrated it also in a book, he again came back for me. So when you write about their impunity, they do impunity, you write about it, they come for you. So this is not an issue to be ignored. The international community must really have the eyes on Uganda. They must do something. Because if not, for us, we are not ready to give up on the struggle. We shall continue to speak against the impunity they do to us. So if they kill us, will they kill us all? When the international community is looking, when they are not doing anything. So I call upon all of you, international community, civil society organizations, the USA government, the European Union, please to step in and have a look at the human rights violations in Uganda.
For some time, I worked on humanitarian programs in Uganda. But some years back, I began to notice that the country's health statistics were lagging behind those of some of its neighbors, even though the country was receiving enormous amounts of foreign aid, a lot of it for health. The reason for these poor health statistics wasn't hard to find. It turns out that the henchmen surrounding the country's leader, Yoweri Museveni, had been stealing just about every shilling that wasn't nailed down. This included even donor programs intended for AIDS and malaria victims, and even children's vaccine programs. Given this, I began to wonder why the donors were allowing this, and why hundreds of millions of dollars continued to pour in to Ugandan government each year. Well, the reason for that actually lies much farther back in history. Shortly after Museveni seized power by force in 1986, he formed a very close relationship with the Reagan administration, and even with Reagan himself. At the time, the Reagan administration was very concerned about developments in Sudan, Uganda's northern neighbor, where an Islamic group, which was very closely allied to the Muslim Brotherhood, was on the rise and would eventually seize power in the country. This was a problem because it seemed to pose a threat to Egypt, which was a close ally not only of the United States, but also of Israel. And so in the early 1990s, the US government began funneling clandestine weapons to southern Sudanese rebels who are trying to destabilize their country. And Museveni was, of course, assisting with this. And in return, he received increasing amounts of foreign aid. With this money, he not only rigged elections, but also began supporting other insurgencies and other military interventions in neighboring countries, including particularly Rwanda and Congo, and eventually not only Sudan, but South Sudan when that country became independent, and also began launching military onslaughts even within Uganda itself in the north and east of the country. All told, Museveni's military interventions have cost upwards of millions of lives. The tragedy of this is that the Ugandan people would like nothing more than to show Museveni the door and to have new leadership in the country, but the repression there is intense. Even members of parliament are routinely tortured. For example, in 2012, young firebrand, anti-corruption firebrand Serena Nabanda, who was a newly elected parliamentarian and confronted Museveni to his face on corruption, ended up poisoned under very mysterious circumstances. When 4 of her parliamentary colleagues suggested that the government might have had a hand in this and tried to launch an investigation, they were jailed, and the forensic investigation was shut down. Then in 2017, Member of Parliament Betty Namboze was tortured inside Parliament itself for leading a filibuster against a bill that would enable Museveni to rule for life. Then in 2018, internationally renowned musician and parliamentarian Bobby Wine, along with 4 of his parliamentary colleagues and dozens of their supporters, was also detained and for more than a week. And when they finally emerged, many of them were on crutches as well. The US government and other donors, the World Bank and the UK and so on, maintain very close relationships with Museveni, whose troops are now fighting at America's behest in Somalia against al-Shabaab militants there, and also serving as guards in Iraq, where they have helped to enable the drawdown of US forces there. Meanwhile, money continues to flow into Museveni's government. The IMF opened a $500 million loan facility for Uganda to deal with the repercussions of the COVID-19 epidemic. The medical repercussions of that epidemic have not been severe in Uganda, but the economic fallout has been terrible. Large numbers of people are destitute and hungry, and yet much of this money that has been loaned to Uganda has also begun to disappear, and scandals are popping up all over. And yet, when Member of Parliament Francis Zake, an opposition figure, tried to give relief food to his hungry constituents, he was arrested, held for 3 days, and emerged barely able to walk or see. He now walks with a cane, even though he is only 29 years old and was in perfect health before this. So really, what can we do about this? This really needs international intervention. The people of Uganda need support from all of us. And we really need to join hands and speak out against these atrocities so that all the world can hear.
What we have seen during COVID, during lockdown, during the time some of us were in quarantine, it's more of a reflection of what has been happening for a long time. Maybe that we did not have sufficient time, or a time when it was all out clear for some people, even for those who are in doubt initially, to see. So even skeptics have been able to see that We cannot keep in place a system that is corrupt or a system that is not accountable, that ultimately it's a danger to all of us in situations like this where we see that one of the most important things that we would need, which is trust, is not there, that even when people are being advised to do things that you think are for their own good, they cannot believe because they think that government is up to something else. It shows you that there is a breakdown in accountability, which in turn is making people doubt what government is doing. So if we cannot correct, if we cannot address issues to do with governance, then nothing can be in order. No one would be safe. No one would expect that development can happen in such a situation.
Ugandans have suffered for more than 30 years now. We cannot find medicines in public or government hospitals. We cannot find teachers in schools. We cannot afford even proper housing. There is overwhelming rates of unemployment in this country, and the few young people who are employed are underemployed and underpaid. It is because of this that Ugandans have stood up to change the status quo and take away the leadership that serves themselves, but bring a leadership that serves the people, for the people and by the people.
As renewed Uganda, we cannot claim to have forces of change if we don't have forces of unity. We want to go far, we can go alone. But if we want to go further as renewed Uganda, we have to go together. The unity of the opposition parties or platforms in the country stand a very trying moment. Having us united is us against the incumbent government. We all can play a role, and we are very much important in the struggle. So as renewed Uganda, this is not a competition. It is not a do or die. It is a brother, a colleague in the struggle. We identify ourselves together and we march towards liberating Uganda for a renewed Uganda. I believe if we are together as the oppositional platforms, we can all play a very bigger and greater impact for Mother Uganda. Renewed Uganda, Chisoboka.
We have always said that there is a need, an urgent need for Ugandans, those in opposition, especially those who are fighting for freedom, to unite and bring all sources together. This is an obvious thing. Our cultures have sayings, like in Uganda they say, Agali awamuge galume nyama. Unity is strength. That is something that's known world over. So we have to work together because we have a common enemy, which is a politics that is backward, a dictatorship. So we have to work together. We may not agree on everything, but our emphasis in NT has been, even if we don't agree on an approach, even if we don't get a common presidential candidate, can we work together? Do we have to antagonize each other and insult one another when our common enemy is laughing at us? So opposition unity was needed yesterday. We should do it immediately because Ugandans right now are demanding for that unity so that we transform our country. So our focus is to say, let's fight to see that we have common candidates, for example. Let's fight to see that we fight together. But even if we don't succeed in getting a common candidate, let's respect one another. Let's share resources. Let's protect our votes at the same time. Some of us have strengths in places where others don't have. Can we coordinate so that the effort is synonymous and directed to the one mission that we have of liberating Uganda? That's our mission, and that's the way we view opposition unity, and we are 100% for opposition unity.
It is important for Ugandans to know where we are, where we have come from, such that we can determine what is our future. As a member of the Democratic Party, the oldest political party in this country, by the way, maybe it is the third oldest political party in the whole of Africa, we have fought for almost the last 60 years to achieve justice for our people, to achieve equality for our people, to achieve necessary, good, and outstanding change for this beautiful gift which is Uganda. Uganda is an agreement of almost 16 sub-regions that came together and gave us this gift. But we are at a time when it is being annihilated. Someone seated somewhere who fought in a bush somewhere is here and is grabbing it from the people. We are saying that, hey, unless people get back and understand that they have the power, I am a staunch supporter and a believer in people having their power. Some call it people power. When we come together, it doesn't matter our political formation. Democratic Party like myself, Forum for the Democratic Change, the National Unity Platform, some from the National Resistance Movement, or the Alliance for National Transformation. Just name it. What is key and important is us understanding that we are at a crossroad and we need to channel all our efforts in one direction such that we can achieve change, the change that we have yearned for, the change people out there are crying for, not just any change, not sarcastic or fundamental change, but real change. Change whereby our future, the future of our children, the future of our great-grandchildren is important and key and good. That is the change, and the only way we can do that is coming together, put all our efforts together, and we achieve a good country because we are all Ugandans.
Fellow women out there, it's not a question anymore whether we desire change in Uganda today or not. Actually, this change should have come yesterday. We have suffered consequences of this failed state more than anyone else. You know as much as I know that so many women die every day. They go to hospitals and fail to get attention. They die every time because of childbirth-related cases. You know that we have educated children, they've gone to universities and failed to get jobs. And then some of us have decided to join Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu, among others, to foster change peacefully. And I'm happy that our children are fighting alongside him. This change, if we do not struggle to cause it peacefully, it will come by whatever means. People have endured President Museveni for 35 years. They are not willing to take him on, to watch him anymore. We either struggle with them to cause the change peacefully now, or we await the consequences of a change of a state through violence. And some of us saw consequences of that fight when the World War took place here amidst us. We lost many of our brothers, many of our fathers. Many women suffered and others lost their children calling. I hear they carried pushcarts. I don't want to carry my children like my parents carried me, running away from the violence. Women, the time is now. If we don't do it peacefully, someone will opt to do it for us, but might do it with far much reaching consequences that will affect us. Please, do not play a passive role. Together, we can deliver this change that we all desire to see.
Unity identifies true leadership. When Jesus was picking his disciples, he picked disciples with different professions to ensure that the message of unity and togetherness reached all corners of the earth. And that it did. They all had different qualities and different gifts, but they worked in harmony. And it was due to that leadership that we are able to use the Bible today as a guiding light. We see unity all around us. Our body is a perfect example of unity. Every single part and organ and cell in our body works together to make us whole and healthy persons. We have lost so many of our brothers and sisters in this movement for change. Serena Nebanda, Muhammad Kirumila, Rita Nabukenya, Barbara Alimadi, among many, many others. These were Ugandans. No more death. In a new Uganda, the people of Uganda will decide who their leader will be, not the leaders themselves. Country before self. And it will not and should not be the Western powers. That has not yielded any results. The people of Uganda have already united around a common goal and a collective vision. It is important that the leaders are listening to the overwhelming voice of the people of Uganda. Unity is strength. Martin Luther King Jr. said, and I quote, "Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly." If we can focus on our strengths as parties, as individuals, religious leaders, and Ugandans, rather not our weaknesses, a new Uganda awaits us all. We are Ugandans.
Under the responsibility to unite and protect, we are in very dark times, but it is our civil right to create the light in a new Uganda. I am calling upon everybody to stay on course, to be resilient, demystify your fear, exercise your right, reclaim your dignity. Many of us are going to die, but if that is the price we have to pay, so be it. Because then we'll be able to create a new Uganda for peace. All Ugandans, this is a message to us to stay on course, to be resilient, to demystify the militarization, to resist the vote buying and all forms of militarization. Please, because you have a right to create a new Uganda.
My own sister, Barbara Alimadi, was part of the struggle for liberation in Uganda. Many Ugandans got to know Barbara in 2012 when she led a protest in front of police headquarters in Kampala with other young women. Now, what had inspired this demonstration that went viral and now has been viewed more than 1 million times? Barbara had been sitting watching the news, and she saw Ingrid Turinawe, one of the leading members and a leader of the Forum for Democratic Change, FDC party, being sexually assaulted in broad daylight by security agents of the Museveni dictatorship. Agents actually grabbed her by her breast in broad daylight in front of everybody and tried to pull her out of her car where she was inside in an attempt to arrest her. One of the many times she had been arrested. And they had the shameless gall to actually grab her by her breast. That is, of course, sexual assault. So my sister, as with many Ugandans, of course, was outraged. And she organized a protest together with other young women. And the protest was unusual in the sense that they did something that had not been done before in Uganda. They bore open their shirts to expose their bras and challenged the officers who had been sent to arrest them and said, "How dare you insult womanhood like this? This is somebody's mother. Do you not have a mother? How could you do that?" And for that protest, they were arrested. But that protest also inspired many other similar protests of that sort in Uganda and in fact in other parts of Africa. I was very proud by my sister's bravery. She inspired me personally with that protest. She inspired many other people as well, including people like Stella Nyanzi, Dr. Stella Nyanzi, who became a very close friend of Barbara. Stella, as many Ugandans know, is a leading academic, very vocal and critical in her denunciation of the Museveni dictatorship, the corruption of the Museveni family, including his wife, Janet Museveni, and she herself has been locked numerous times because of her protest. And Stella herself has inspired many other young Ugandans to become brave. This is what people like Barbara did. Show people that if we just become courageous and work together, the dictatorship has no chance to survive in Uganda. Now, the liberation struggle suffered a severe and tragic setback in April when Barbara passed away suddenly under mysterious circumstances. Barbara is no longer with us, but the struggle continues. And Barbara, fortunately, lived long enough to see the writing on the wall. We had many conversations, and we were both convinced and confident that the beginning of the end had started in Uganda. And we are right. The evidence is even much more clear today when we see the tens of thousands of young people, the People Power movement, coming out in the streets in their red, supporting the candidacy of opposition leaders running against the dictatorship, especially Bobi Wine, who himself has suffered a lot of brutal retribution by the regime. But Uganda is on the march. So even though my sister is no longer with us, many other sisters and brothers has fallen by the roadside, we must continue the struggle until the logical conclusion, which is to end tyranny in Uganda. And together, united, we cannot fail. We must prevail, and we will prevail. For all the Ugandans who have fallen, and sadly, for the Ugandans who will fall, before we get rid of tyranny.
Never again shall it be that this beautiful nation will again experience the oppression of one by another and bear the indignity of being the skunk of the world. Yaga 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 ya.
Zenga buwede tuliyambale kule Menzinga ewede tuliyambale kule Bekibataka gachiwede tuliyambale kule Tulivimba mu Uganda Siyagasi ngawede tuliyambale
Ago amanyi tugalina era mikopa wange wangude tuliyambale kule tulinyumirwa Uganda empya.
Omusolo nga bugendedde tuliyambale kule abalimi nga bafunye akatale tuliyambale kule nga mu nsi olina eddembe tuliyambale kule tulivimba mu Uganda empya amalwaliro nga gateredde tuliyambale kule nga tetukyafa nga tuzaala tuliyambale kule nga buli kikyamu kiteredde tuliyambale